A woman rescued a tiny lion cub and lovingly raised it. However, due to unforeseen hardships, they were forced to part ways. After 8 long years, she stepped into the lion's enclosure once more, only to witness a reaction that left everyone stunned. Sarah Johnson had dreamed of working with wild animals ever since she was a child. She grew up on a farm in Montana, where she was always surrounded by various animals. Her parents encouraged her interest in nature and often took her on hikes through national parks. After finishing school, Sarah enrolled at the University of Montana to study biology. She studied with great enthusiasm, spending much time with books and in laboratories. During summer breaks, Sarah worked as a volunteer at a local wildlife reserve, helping care for animals. After graduating, Sarah got a job as a guide at Serengeti National Park. She was thrilled to have the opportunity to observe wildlife every day. Sarah led tours for visitors, telling them about the park's flora and fauna. One day during a regular tour, Sarah noticed something unusual. In the distance, in the tall grass, she saw some movement. Asking the tourists to stay in the Jeep, Sarah carefully approached. What she discovered stunned her. It was a little lion cub left without its mother. Sarah looked around for any adult lions, but saw no one. The cub was alone and looked very weak and hungry. Sarah knew that without help it would not survive. Without hesitation, she decided to save the little one. Gently wrapping the cub in her jacket, Sarah returned to the Jeep with the tourists. She explained the situation and asked them to stay calm. The group understood and even helped to settle the little passenger more comfortably. Upon returning to the visitor center, Sarah immediately contacted the park's veterinary service. The veterinarians examined the cub and confirmed that it was severely malnourished and dehydrated. It was decided to transport it to the nearest wildlife sanctuary. Sarah volunteered to accompany the cub to the sanctuary. On the way, she held him in her arms, trying to calm him down. The cub was scared, but gradually started to trust Sarah. She named him Leo, recalling the Leo constellation she often observed in the night sky. At the sanctuary, Leo was placed in a special enclosure for young predators. Sarah asked for permission to stay and help with his adaptation. The sanctuary's management, impressed by her care and knowledge, agreed. The first days were especially difficult. Leo was afraid of his new surroundings and refused to eat. Sarah spent almost all her time with him, patiently trying to gain his trust. She fed him with a bottle containing a special formula similar in composition to lion's milk. Gradually, Leo started getting used to Sarah. He allowed her to pet him and happily play with her. Sarah was overjoyed to see the cub becoming more active and curious. She read him books, told him stories, and even sang lullabies. Weeks passed, and Leo grew. He gained weight and strength. Sarah taught him everything a young lion should know: how to hunt, how to communicate with his kind, how to behave in the wild. She used toys and special trainers to develop his skills. Sarah understood that she couldn't always be Leo's only caretaker. She started gradually introducing him to other staff at the sanctuary. This was difficult. Leo was jealous and didn't want to let anyone else near him except Sarah. When Leo turned 6 months old, he was moved to a larger enclosure. There he could move more and explore his surroundings. Sarah continued to visit him every day, but now tried to give him more independence. The sanctuary had other lions as well. Sarah began slowly introducing Leo to them. At first, he was afraid of his fellow lions, but over time he became interested in them. He particularly liked a young lioness named Nala. Days turned into months, and months into years. Leo grew into a strong and handsome lion. His mane became thick and dark, and his gaze confident and calm. Sarah was proud of the lion he had become. Although Leo no longer needed constant care, the bond between him and Sarah remained very strong. Every time she came to his enclosure, Leo greeted her joyfully. He allowed Sarah to pet him, and even sometimes play with her, as he did in his youth. Sarah continued working at the sanctuary, now as a large predator specialist. She participated in various research projects and wildlife conservation programs. Leo's story inspired her to achieve new goals. One day, Sarah received a troubling call from her mother. Her father had become seriously ill and needed constant care. Sarah knew she had to go home, but the thought of parting with Leo broke her heart. Sarah spent a long time explaining to Leo that she needed to leave. Of course, the predator could not understand the words, but it seemed that he felt her sadness. On the last day before her departure, Sarah spent several hours with Leo, just sitting next to him and watching the sunset. As she left, Sarah hoped she would be able to return in a few months. She arranged with her colleagues that they would send her photos and videos of Leo. Sarah believed that their bond would withstand the separation, but life often doesn't go according to plan. Her father's condition turned out to be more serious than initially thought. He required constant care, and Sarah could not leave her parents in such a situation. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. Sarah tried to stay in touch with the sanctuary, but it became more difficult every day. Working as a nurse and caring for her father took all her time and energy. In the sanctuary, Leo had a hard time dealing with the separation. At first, he constantly searched for Sarah, circling his enclosure and listening to every sound. When she didn't appear, Leo became restless and irritable. The sanctuary staff tried to comfort Leo. They brought him his favorite toys and arranged extra activities. But Leo remained indifferent to everything. He lay for hours in the far corner of his enclosure, staring at one spot. Gradually, Leo's behavior began to change. He started snapping at the keepers and refusing food. The veterinarians were worried about his health. Leo had noticeably lost weight, and his coat had become dull. The sanctuary's management tried to find a solution. They invited an animal behavior expert to help Leo adjust. But all efforts were in vain. The lion did not want to communicate with anyone. Meanwhile, Sarah continued caring for her father. His condition would improve, then worsen again. There were moments when it seemed like he was getting better, but then a new crisis would follow. Despite being busy, Sarah never stopped thinking about Leo. She kept his photos and often rewatched videos of him. At night, she dreamed of walking through the sanctuary with him again. Years passed. Sarah's father slowly but surely began to recover. The doctors spoke of positive progress. Sarah began to think about returning to the sanctuary, but was afraid that Leo would no longer recognize her. Finally, after 8 long years, Sarah's father's condition had stabilized to the point where he no longer needed constant care. Sarah realized it was time to return home. She contacted the sanctuary and informed them of her return. Her colleagues were glad to hear from her, but warned that Leo had changed a lot over the years. They advised her to be cautious when meeting him. On the day of her return, Sarah was more nervous than ever. She stood for a long time in front of the sanctuary entrance, gathering her courage. When she finally entered, she was greeted by old friends and colleagues. Sarah immediately headed for Leo's enclosure. From a distance, she saw him, a huge lion with a thick, dark mane. He lay on a rock, gazing into the distance. Sarah felt her heart tighten with excitement. The keeper opened the enclosure door, and Sarah cautiously stepped inside. Leo didn't move, as if not noticing her presence. Sarah slowly approached, quietly calling his name. Suddenly, Leo turned his head and looked straight at Sarah. His eyes showed surprise and disbelief. He slowly rose and took a few steps toward her. Sarah froze, unsure of what to expect. Leo came closer, carefully studying her. He sniffed, as if trying to catch a familiar scent. Sarah stood still, barely breathing. And suddenly, Leo let out a quiet growl and rushed toward Sarah. But instead of attacking, he simply placed his huge paws on her shoulders, just as he had done when he was young. Sarah hugged him, burying her face in his thick mane. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she stroked Leo. "I missed you so much, my boy," she whispered. The lion purred softly in response, as if saying that he missed her too. The sanctuary staff watched in amazement. No one had expected Leo to react like this after so many years of separation. It was a true miracle. From that day on, Leo seemed to come back to life. He once again became interested in the world around him, happily interacted with the keepers. Sarah spent as much time with him as she could, making up for the lost years. Gradually, Leo began to socialize with the other lions again. Leo formed a particularly strong bond with Nala, the same lioness he had been fond of in his youth. Seeing him no longer alone filled Sarah with joy. She returned to her work at the sanctuary, dedicating herself not only to Leo, but also to caring for many other animals. Yet, no matter how much time passed, Leo always held a special place in her heart. The extraordinary bond between Sarah and Leo, which endured years of separation and challenges, became a powerful symbol of loyalty and devotion. It served as a reminder that true friendship transcends species and can overcome any obstacle.